Hi, my name is Ben Richardson, and the focus of my research is on the Collage city. Eclectic fragments, the collective identity of a city. My research aims to dissect the theory of the Collage city proposed by Rowan Cotter, and analyse the city of Perth, Australia within this lens, focusing on the emotive power of identity within the built form, preservation, and the missed opportunities of the juvenile city of Perth. Alongside the Collage city theory, Lewis Mumford and Kenneth Frampton's breakdown of critical regionalism, and Denise Scott Brown and Robert Venturi's learning from Las Vegas findings will be analysed and applied to the precedent and case studies. Two city precedents in Berlin, Germany and Milan, Italy will be analysed within the scope of the aforementioned theorists, highlighting the power of the emotive identity in the built form. Unpacking a wealth of contemporary and historical culture captured within the urban landscape of the two cities over polarising timelines. Examples drawn from the precedents will be used to identify a similar context to Perth and the missed opportunities in pursuit of macroplanning a utopia. The thesis research revolves around the Collage city theory of Rowan Cotter, outlining their comprehension of two opposing theoretical frameworks of a utopian city. The modernist approach of master planning a utopia, an all-encompassing rigid set of rules for a whole city to adhere to, and the postmodern approach of the Collage city, a city developed by fallacious happenings, an eclectic mix of reactive designs to the immediate needs of the inhabitants that does not disturb the overall urban fabric of the city. Predating Rowan Cotter's work on the Collage city, Lewis Mumford and Kenneth Frampton's studies on critical regionalism highlight the influential impact architecture can have on moulding an urban environment. Imbued with identity, architecture has been historically used as a political tool of symbolism, a manifestation of ideals. Lewis Mumford and Kenneth Frampton's study on regionalism, both critical and romantic, highlight the power of connecting architecture to place, a tool to resisting globalisation and retaining isolated national identity. Critical regionalism is used to define political and national identity and independence. However, this is contextual to time. Frampton describes local and national identity as paradoxical, for the development of modern culture depends on the cross-fertilisation of previous culture, highlighted in this time-lapse history map of ruling states of Europe through the ages. While present cities we are familiar with have transcended centuries, the countries that they represent today are relatively juvenile. Berlin's most notorious period, Nazi dictator Berlin saw a grand reforming to the whole city, coined the world capital of Germania, Albert Speer's magnum opus to Hitler. Lewis Mumford advocated strongly against this blood and soil regionalism in 1941, stating the Nazis' defiance of modernism was no accident, a calculated move to abolish any alternative expression that would threaten the Nazi totalitarian creed. Mumford highlights the Nazis' efforts to eradicate any evidence of past German liberal thought through the destruction of modernist monuments, literature and art. However, Berlin has endured 5 radical swings of political rule throughout the 20th century. As a precedent of a collage city, it is unique. The city has endured decades of war, opposing occupying powers, built up as a monarchy capital and levelled to the ground to eradicate a tyrannical dictator. Though the city has played host to 5 polarising swings of political rule within the 20th century alone, ruling parties of which completely opposed the predecessor, remnants of each era remain in the city to date. A monarchy, tyrannical government, puppet state and democratic republic. Evident in these images of architecture present in this city, modern Berlin hosts remnants to numerous architectural styles and monuments reflecting current and past political and cultural ideologies. Be it triumphant memories or dark stains in history, it all contributes to the narrative of the city. Milan will be analysed for the management of preservation and integration of historical and contemporary architectural typologies, highlighting the city's example of juxtaposing typologies. Consider moments of planning disguised as eclecticism transcending over centuries of cultural evolution. Reflected Roman, latter, Italian aesthetic with industrial overtone and a restricted building height is the common typology found in the city. However, new buildings, while adhering to the height restrictions, are encouraged to be designed in a juxtaposition to the existing neoclassical structures. Thus, attention-grabbing architecture stands bold amongst the background of a classical Italian city. These moments of architecture are landmarks to the city, points of interest doubling as wayfinders for pedestrians. Evident in Bocconi University, one of Milan's premier university, the building's exterior envelope resembles that of a contemporary take on brutalism, a finer polished grand monolithic form. Bosco Vertical, a skyscraper garden well above the height restrictions, but an experiment in combining heavily vegetated landscape and apartment living, in a climate with very hostile tolerances to a lot of flora species. Fondazione Prada. At the lavish end of the spectrum, a museum of modern and postmodern art, the building in gold is exactly that, a building covered in actual gold flake. Gucci Wall apartment. Lastly, a perfect example of a harmonious marriage of classical Roman apartment typology and postmodernism in Venturi's coined term, the decorated shed. A humble apartment building transformed into a worldwide art culture icon. A carefully considered and tasteful mural cycling every year to 6 months, converting a once blank functionless wall into an advertisement for Gucci and a wayfinder for the city. One I personally distinctly remember admiring on my way to the metro from my apartment on my morning commute during my time in Milan. Though none of the forms can be linked to Italy by their typology, they are touchstones for the city of Milan to its inhabitants. Perth is a great example of master planning a utopia failing to formalise city limits. Macro planning an enormous suburban area as a city with ever-expanding boundaries, stealing focus from the economic hub, the actual city part of our city. Framing the focus back on the CBD, Perth in its ambition to become a landmark city took very little care with its architectural heritage during the mining boom of the mid-20th century. Federation and Art Deco style buildings gave way for internationalist and modernist style skyscrapers, husked to house the economic leaders of the West Australian economy. Internationalist style, stemming from the same branch as modernism, followed the practice form follows function. No ornamentation, architecture that can be picked up and dropped anywhere in the world, devoid of any reflection of contextual culture. Buildings with no significance to culture do not often last long, offering no incentive for their preservation. To stand the test of time, internationalist buildings rely on the necessity of their function, or the development of significant history pertaining to the function of the building. Internationalist structures act as a blank canvas for identity to be imprinted on. However, this process is time-consuming. Imbuing cultural identity through function takes years, even decades. A collage city is the idea of eclectic styles and elements populating the streetscape. The majority of the Perth CBD, the city built on gold, mining, main streetscapes and building typologies can be categorised under one mantra: form follows function. In stark contrast to repetitive shells of modernist buildings, a collage city opts for an alternative, reflecting and recycling symbolism of past ideals for their inherent and non-inherent attributes, resulting in a streetscape full of quirks, past identities and memorable moments. Considered in depth and applied appropriately, each building stands out from the other while blending harmoniously as a streetscape into the overall urban fabric, to the same efficiency of a reserved modernist aesthetic, minus the character. It is the discretion of the consumer what registers as memorable moments. A style that resonates to the consumer's taste will be the landmark of that particular area. Without the unique quirks, in essence identity, the differences between multiple streetscapes of a city blur, leaving the consumer with no memorable landmark and the streetscapes forgettable. Responsibility falling on the function of those buildings to be the wayfinders and anchors to the memory of the city. However, this is at the mercy of the occupying tenant. Whether the tenant still occupies the same space into the future is as likely as predicting the outcome of the Melbourne Cup 2 years in advance. Postmodern theorists Denise Scott Brown and Robert Venturi's Learning from Las Vegas outline a case study to a postmodern modernist approach to design in The Duck and the Shed. Venturi surmised all architecture boils down to either a decorated shed, functional, boring architecture, easily forgettable but the appeal is carried by an elaborate front facade, or a duck, a building that has reduced itself in importance to its sign that it becomes the sign itself. As a 26-year resident of Perth, I know this hidden building is the Bank West Tower. To anyone new to the city post-2015, it will be known to them as the South 32 building. Further, prior to 1994, it was the Bond Tower. One of numerous examples within the Perth CBD, these modernist skyscrapers, or decorated sheds, are empty vessels relying on the identity being stamped on the outside, in essence, decorating the sheds. Though still juvenile, Perth has missed an opportunity to preserve a wealth of character throughout the CBD. For the majority, early Art Deco and Federation-style aesthetics of the city made way for modernist skyscrapers of the mid-20th century, an adaptable shed to house the corporate economy. Success of great traditional cities in Berlin and Milan lie in their adaptability, illustrated in seemingly eclectic fragments of communities, distinct in individuality. Be the result in dark history of a city divided and pulled in multiple political directions with Berlin, or Milan for carefully considered preservation and integration of historical and contemporary architectural typologies, it is clear. An identity of a city is not wholly represented in one architectural form or typology, rather a composition of fallacious happenings.